Gaelic Football on Off the Ball.
With AIB, proud sponsors of the GAA Senior Football Championship. Check out #TheToughest for more.
You're very welcome back. As you know, at this stage, I'm sure Meath are Tailteann Cup winners 2023. They beat down on Saturday 2-13 to 14 points. A brilliant second half display. Their manager is with us. He may or may not speak Latin. We can only hope. Colm O'Rourke, congratulations.
Thank you very much, Joe. Thank you.
You've done more for Latin than anyone in this country the last 50 years.
Pardon?
You've done more for Latin in this country than any man the last 50 years.
Yeah, well, it was funny since Saturday afternoon. I have anybody who sends me a text or a message now seems to feel that they have to put a bit of Latin into it. So I'm glad to have done something for the ancient language. But it was when I was in school and principal, it was a subject that we held on to in school, whereas it had died out in most places. So there was only a few hundred people doing Latin at Leaving Cert level, and I was always proud that one of those schools was ours.
Right, okay, very good. You get plenty of bad days in sport. This was one of the very good days. You really looked, and the players looked like you enjoyed the aftermath, the afterglow. It was a lot of happy faces, very satisfied air.
Yeah, well, why wouldn't we? I suppose we haven't won anything for a long time, haven't won a national title for 20-something years. So the lads themselves have put a lot of work into it. And very few of them were even born when Meath won the last All-Ireland. They were a very young team, so it was obviously very satisfying for everybody involved.
You spoke glowingly about the players afterwards. You said their commitment pretty much surpasses anything you've seen in your time involved with GAA.
Yeah, well, obviously I came from a very dedicated team, but these lads are just as dedicated as we were, and their training for the last 6 or 8 months has just been top class. And for a young group who've come together, and we have chopped and changed a good bit as the year went on, I was just absolutely thrilled with the way that they applied themselves.
Yeah. It has been an eventful year in that respect. I was reading you've used maybe 30 players across the season, and 4 of the starters against Down started the first league game. So that would suggest you've had a lot going on and chopping and changing and trying to find the right formula.
Yeah, well, I suppose during the league we used a number of players, and then we reassessed after the league and brought in quite a few players. We brought in 6 off the under-20 panel, and there was 4 from a development squad that we were running alongside the senior team. So 10 came in, so I suppose 10 had to go out. And I think we have 13 players who played championship for Meath for the first time. And like on Saturday, the goalie and 3 of the backs were playing in their first campaign. Conor Great midfield was in his first campaign, and a couple of forwards. So it was a very inexperienced side.
There was a period where towards the end of the league, and then if you include the Offaly game, where you were 6 games without a win. I presume that was feeling a bit sticky for you personally and for everybody. Compare, that version of Meath where you were then and this version that we're now seeing in late July, because the improvements I'm sure are fairly sizable.
Yeah, and you can see the improvements coming in training all the time. I suppose you cannot introduce that many new players to a team without taking a bit of pain in the short term. And I suppose from a management point of view, which includes Barry Callahan, Stephen Bray and Paul Garrigan, one of the greatest sources of satisfaction for us is that the win on Saturday and the performance justified our faith in a new group of players.
Yes. I'm curious for your perspective on something, and I'll put it in blunt terms and you can choose not to take offence if that's okay. So, and there was almost a bit of schadenfreude about it, whereby early part of the league there was like a sense of, well, look at this now, O'Rourke sitting on a TV couch, had it easy. He preached attacking football, kicking football, and then in the league, the likes of Derry and Dublin exposed that as naive and of a bygone era, and now he's seen what it's really like at the coalface. Was there any truth in that, in the sense that you were too open? It was a different, naive style of football versus what you did at the weekend, or more the growing pains? Or what's your perspective on how you first approached the year with where we are now?
Well, it is true. We were very open at the back, but the system that we tried to impose defensively in the league when we were ripped apart by Derry and Dublin is exactly the same one as we had in Croke Park last Sunday.
Right.
It just took time. It took perseverance. It took confidence from the players that it was going to work if we kept at it and kept at it and kept at it. And you just can't throw a whole heap of new players into a team, but as I said, taking the pain. So, when people commented from the outside on naive, everybody uses that word now. But you work hard on a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and maybe go into a game on Sunday and you're ripped apart, and you go back at it and do the same over and over and over again. But we could see incremental gains taking place from game to game, and of course sometimes new players came in and added to it. So every game we thought we were making progress. We when we played down in Parnell Park, it was our best defensive display of the year. We limited them to 1 goal and 9 points, and we could see from that we were beginning to make progress. So the criticisms that people had in the beginning of the year, as if I was some dinosaur from the 80s who were going to go out and play sort of man-to-man football. I'm involved in club management on a continuous period over that time. We won championships with Simonstown playing sweepers. It's not as if we have, the system was new or anything. It just took time to bed in, and we were getting better as time went on, and we've continued to get better. And now that the fellas themselves have great confidence in it, and I think we'll get even better. Okay,
well, that's very interesting. Same defensive system then versus now. Again, without seeing all your games or every minute of them or anything close to it, I was wondering if you were going to tell me, we had a road to Damascus moment after the Offaly defeat and suddenly went more defensive. So it's a more steady as it goes, as opposed to a revolution.
Yeah, well, the reality for most teams is that they try and play with a fairly defensive structure where they're getting up to 12 players back, and we were trying to leave 3 upfield. And it's no different really from any other team. It's just the best teams with the best players limit the opposition to less scores. It's as simple as that. Yeah. And we hope that we are getting better and better players, and that they will cope with the better forward lines next year, much more so than we did this year. But it will not be a change of system. It's just getting used to it and practicing and perfecting it as best we can.
What pleased you most about the performance on Saturday?
Maybe that defensive structure that we're talking about. Down scored 8 goals against Laois. We worked hard on defence in the 3 weeks. We weren't happy with our defence against Antrim. We spent hours and hours pouring through videos, working on the field. It was a pretty forensic look at defending over the few weeks and all the different sessions. But you could see progress was made. You can put fellas on the board and say, you should be here and you should be here, and the next thing the opposition come and just sweeps it all away. But you could see that we had worked on it fairly hard, and that the lads themselves were beginning to get comfortable with it. So in some respects, I suppose, to hold down to 13 points, even though they had a couple of good goal chances, they kicked some bad wides too. But we figured that we had to get to close to 20 to win. And as it turned out, we did get close to that. 2-13.
Yeah. Some of the point taking in the second half was brilliant. Do players have carte blanche? If you think it's on, even if it's a bit of a Hail Mary, you go for it?
Yeah, well, we encourage fellas to play and to have confidence in their own ability. We encourage them to take responsibility. I see football as an expression of human nature, where people should be encouraged to go and express themselves as much as possible within the team system, and that football is a part of their lives, just the same as they must look after their jobs and their families and their education, and that football is only one small part of it, and it has to be a form of self-expression away from the pressures of living. So, to me, there'd be not much point in going out and having a joyless experience playing football. That's supposed to be the entertainment part of life. And I was glad to see fellas shook off the shackles a little bit in the second half. And again, we just encouraged them to go and play. But our strike rate the first half was dreadfully poor. I think we had a conversion rate of about 35%. The second half it went up to 80%.
Wow. Yeah, that's some going. Because I understand the temptation for any manager to dig deep into the stats and to say, well, beyond that distance and that close to a touchline on either side, you're unlikely to score. Nobody's shooting outside of these areas, and that's just that. I understand that sense. I feel like Dublin kind of were veering close to that a couple of years ago, maybe.
Yeah, I'd say so. But like most of the shots the lads took on were on.
True.
Now, Jack O'Connor had one incredible point from the right-hand side, and I think as he was soling up the right wing, I was shouting into myself, Jack, don't do it, don't do it. Next thing he launches this ball and it goes over the bar, and it was really an inspirational score.
Yeah, but there's probably an argument as well. If you want to win something, it can't be about containment, and you need some inspirational moments and inspirational scores. You have to go for it.
Yeah, and players have a lot of individual flair, and there's no point in trying to coach that out of them. I would feel that we should encourage that part of it. But most of them are disciplined and work well within a team structure as well.
I presume as manager, if you want, you now have a whole array of statistics available to you. Do you value them? Do you put much stock in them? If so, which ones?
The GPS systems and the trackers and a lot of this, you have access to hundreds of pieces of information, really, and you can paralyze a team by feeding them too much information in that regard. So, there's a few important statistics. Obviously, conversion rates on scores and parts of the field conversion. The high-speed running, I think, and total distance covered are two valuable parts of information that you get. And I'd say we only use to the players about 2 or 3 pieces of information. We've tried to distill it down to the very, very important things, because I think at times if you give players too much statistical information, they often are looking at it in terms of their own performance, and I think it may limit their performance if they're thinking things like, I don't want to give away the ball because my stats would look bad, so I'll take on a safe pass instead of maybe trying something a bit different. So yeah. I think you have to be very careful in the sort of statistical information that you give to players.
And do you find them useful? You may not share everything with the players, but I guess you have a look at most things. Does it tend to routinely, if ever, change your sense of a game that you might have seen in real time when you see stats 2 days later?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, but the other side of it is you have to make decisions on the run in a game, and say taking off players, putting on players, and God give us 2 eyes to see. And if a manager down at pitch level can't have a fair idea of what's happening and make the right decision, well, he shouldn't be in charge of the team.
What has struck you then about the realities of intercounty management, the demands or the logistics or the realities, if anything? I mean, I'm sure you knew it was going to be full on.
I knew it was going to be full on. I've been running club teams in Simonstown and helping out at other teams and running the school team. So the biggest single thing, I suppose, is the time element away from the training. The nice part is training, and it's great fun being there with the lads, and training is always enjoyable because they're so committed. But the background work on the statistical information and the video work and looking at oppositions, you could look at 3 or 4 games that a team played in because you have access to all of that. And you could look at that sort of thing. So you could have hours and hours poring over videos of opposition games and seeing weaknesses or whatever and trying to work accordingly. So I suppose there is a massive time aspect, and you also are a manager of a very big team behind the scenes, which can take up to 20 people. So there's a lot of work in it because I think most intercounty groups now would probably, between players and backroom staff, would be between 50 and 60 in number.
Wow. Okay. So you're on that phone a lot, I would take it.
You're on the phone, yeah. You're on the phone and you're watching stuff. And I suppose the other biggest thing about it is it's very hard to get away from thinking about it.
Yeah.
People say, well, you can put in X number of hours, but you're always sort of 24/7 thinking about it. And like that's, I think, Joe, the other side of it is this was, and I'm not saying only the Tailteann Cup, but like this was a secondary competition. Like it's still a long way up to the top level and what other teams at the very top, like Dublin and Kerry, might be doing.
Yes. No, I can imagine. We had David Herity on the other week, who was the Kildare hurling manager, has just stepped down in the last few weeks, and he was saying that I'm not surprised. It turns out he stepped down, but he was saying even when he's playing hide and seek with his kids, he makes damn sure to find a good hiding place so he has time to think about hurling. And that's the reality. I mean, it's all he thinks about, you know.
Yeah, well, it also would only increase my respect for what Jim Gavin did in charge of Dublin while he was holding down a very, very busy and responsible job and still finding the time to run the most successful team in the history of the game.
Yeah.
And that achievement was just incredible. Like, I can see why a lot of us who are in charge of teams have to have a certain type of job, or like myself and Jack O'Connor being retired.
Mm. Yeah, I can only imagine. Do you miss the school?
Yeah, I loved school. I loved everything about it, and I do miss it. I think I like young people, and being involved in a school. It's a sort of a vibrant experience. Every day it's full on, but the fun, the banter, the news. You have 100 people to talk to by 9 o'clock every morning. So you miss that social connection because, okay, you have the training, but the involvement with the staff in the school. And I do miss the young people, even though, as somebody said to me, if you said, I love young boys, it might get you a stretching Mountjoy for a while, so you have to be careful in that regard. But the involvement with young people I always found refreshing, and it made life very interesting.
Yes. I guess it's one of these kind of cliched questions, but I dare say you see the difference in the challenges a lot of them are facing this decade versus 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Absolutely, and I suppose, again, everybody says the same thing as the phone, and the phone is their access to the outer world, to a huge well of knowledge and good things, and at the same time it's a completely dangerous weapon. And I suppose as principal of a school, a lot of problems that I dealt with over the last 10, 15 years had to do with phones and different aspects of phones and misuse of phones and the ills that they bring.
Is there a change in the average demeanour of an average student in Ireland 2015 versus Ireland 1995?
Oh, absolutely. But I would still find them that they're really friendly, respectful, dedicated, committed to the cause if you get them going the right way. The innocence maybe that we had 20 years ago is probably gone to a certain extent. But,
right.
There's young people, we have the best of young people, and I think young people have got better in a lot of ways.
Oh, really? Like how so?
Yeah. Well, I think they are very committed, and I think that when you look at the hostility that was there sometimes with young people years ago, and I see it. There's very little violence towards each other in schools now that I see now. Maybe I'm deluded in that regard compared to some other places, but certainly that aspect of life has improved dramatically. Respect for others, respect for different cultures, nationality, sexual orientation. That has all improved dramatically over the last number of years, all for the better.
Yes. It's funny, I watched your interview with Tommy Tiernan. There's no real question coming here, but I just thought it was such an interesting point that you made, where you and Tommy were, I don't know, reminiscing about certain kind of characters that I would remember from my youth as well, in, you know, up and down Irish towns, like clearly very smart people, wisecracks, mischief at all times, one-liners. And you made a really interesting observation that we're now at a point where everybody in the main is being educated. It wasn't always the case in Ireland, and so I don't know if we're a bit more homogenised or a bit more straight-laced, but that kind of Irish character that most people would know from towns down the years is not as prevalent as maybe decades previously.
No, they were the self-educated people.
Yes.
I grew up with a lot of them. I grew up in a farming community, and there was an awful lot of single men who lived in cottages and who were farm labourers or industrial workers and things like that. And they had a particular take on life and funny comments and witticisms, which would go totally over the head of most young people now. So they're a huge loss. They were the characters of the area. And as I said at that time, I think education has made a lot of people dull and boring. And we all sort of think and do the same things. And if it doesn't come off the phone, a lot of young people now, they're not very good. One of the things that are not good on is education by observation and observing people and listening to people. That's certainly gone downhill. And the character with the funny comments, they're a dying breed, because everybody wants to go to third level now, and a lot of people would be better off not going to it and going out and working and getting their education as part of work rather than education in itself followed by work.
Yeah. What would you change about the education system, secondary school, if you could, you know, be dictator for a day?
Joe, how long have you got? Well, I think that the biggest change would be that obviously exam results, and we were an academic school, but I often thought like that the exam results and the pursuit of excellence in that regard meant that a lot of people went to third level who were better off if they didn't go. But third level has sort of become a bit of a snob value in some regards, and apprenticeships have lost ground, and instead of that it should probably be the other way around. So I would encourage more people to be taking on apprenticeships in an awful lot of areas. Like a lot of countries in Europe, a big percentage of their population don't go straight into university or third level. They work and they do their schooling as part of the third level as part of apprenticeship. I think that's the biggest need. But that is changing, and there is a huge number of new apprenticeships coming on stream in a lot of areas. Couldn't come half quick enough from my point of view anyway. And one of the biggest problems I see is the amount of people unsuited to third level who go for a year and then fail their exams and are thrown out, and then they don't know what to do.
Yeah. And is the Leaving Cert pressure on kids worse than ever?
I don't think it is. I think pressure on people to perform is there. Pressure on people to perform in sport, in life, and everything else. And I believe pressure brings out the best in people, and you can't insulate young people from pressure. I know everybody is talking about the pressures of this and the pressures of that. Like, we all face pressures in our life. Pressure to work, pressure to look after a family, and pressure to buy a house. All of those things, you know, you can't sort of do things for people that they don't feel pressure. Otherwise, you wouldn't have high performers.
Yes, that's very fair. Sean Boylan. I mean, it'd be a funny thing to show you two a picture of Saturday. You know, if we could travel back in time to, I don't know, 20 years ago and say, here's a picture from 2023. I'm sure you'd both have a few questions. So your decision to get him back involved, talk to us about that.
Well, you know, one of the problems of Ireland as well, and problems of modern management, is ageism. which you don't have in a lot of other sports. But like in the first thing that's thrown at you in Gaelic football, if you're anyway old, is that you're a dinosaur and you adhere to a different type of game, and things have changed and you can't understand the modern game. You know, people with intelligence adapt to all circumstances. But anyway, I said to Sean at the start, would he like to come in on the journey? And he said he'd love to be part of it, and comes to training every night. He talks to the lads, and he has that same level of enthusiasm and boyish good humour with people that he always had. And he's an inspirational type of figure. I said to him at the start, if you want to do the team talk before the match at half-time, when it's over, you walk away. I don't care. I'll stand aside. And he has been great with the lads. Chats away to them on an individual basis, has his few words at different times in group settings, but always, of course, a positive influence. And he's loved by young people. Yeah. We had a homecoming in Navan last night, or not a homecoming, but a night for the young supporters. And it's amazing that a man who's nearly 80 years of age was mobbed by young people for the whole night, more so than any player or anybody else. And it just, I suppose, demonstrates his status in Meath. He's the sort of father figure of football, and he's such an entirely positive influence for good with young people that I thought it would be very foolish to have a resource like that available and not use them.
Yeah. I've met him a handful of times and very briefly, but God, yeah, I think the whole country has that sense that if they could ever corner Sean and just, you know, tell them what was on their mind and get some advice, he'd be that kind of a person. Would you two have had been in contact much over the years? You know, is that a relationship which is a regular one, or was this a phone call out of the blue?
Oh no, we'd have a close contact. Most of the players of my era, a lot of those players would have had close contact with Sean for all the years since that. You know, right. We'd regard him as a friend, not just as the manager. And sometimes that relationship is difficult with people who have been the managers of teams, that when they go away from a team, the players then say, well, he was this, that and the other, and may not maintain close relationships. But we all, or a big portion of us, have maintained very close relationships with him. And he's that type of man, like a half hour in the company of Sean Boylan. And maybe this is one of the reasons why he's so successful as a herbalist. And I often think it's the 15, 20 minutes or half hour that he spends with people. He just makes them feel good about themselves.
And how does he do that?
Well, he just has a way of talking to people, and he's a sunny disposition, and he always sees the best in people, and he gives good advice, and he's just that. It's just a unique type of character, and I think he's had a very positive influence on any of the people who he had under his charge when they go into management, because I think we'd all prefer the carrot rather than the stick, because we've learned that from him. Yeah,
that's quite interesting, isn't it? That your Meath team that you played on, like a really tough, hardy team, and it was more carrot than stick. Because I'd look at the outside and say it's stick with that team. Everything's tough with that team.
Yeah, no, he wasn't like that at all. And of course, people would always say to you, Jesus, there must be more to Boylan. He can't be going around friendly and pally with everybody. He must have said some awful things to you inside the dressing room or whatever. But really, he didn't. That the public demeanour and the personal are very similar. Okay, he had the occasional word with people, but I can never remember him really growling at anyone or whatever. And certainly it would be my philosophy for management as well, that most of the time you get much more out of people through encouragement rather than hammering them.
Yes. So regardless of Saturday, which was a very enjoyable day, it seems like you've really enjoyed this year.
Absolutely, but the reality of it is that we were a second division team. We were playing a third division team. We were the highest ranked team in the Tailteann Cup. We were entitled to win it. Now, it was nice to win it the way we did with a fairly new team, even from the start of the year. But it would have been disappointing if a team who shouldn't be in it really, because it wasn't for second division teams, we were entitled to be in the final on the basis of league form, entitled to win it too, and we have to take that into account. And also the realisation that the next step up to competing with the top counties may be 8 or 10 points of a jump, which we have to try and achieve for next year.
What's the biggest, like, as you see it, in what areas is there the biggest gap with the Dublin or with the Kerry or even like a Derry? I mean, is it fitness? Is it conversion rates? Is it just decision making? Like, when you look and try and break down where are we short here, what areas are they ahead of the pack in?
Well, Dublin have had 6 or 7 of the best players I ever saw. That's the first thing. So if you can get quality of players, and obviously if we could get David Clifford too, that would help. But I don't think there's much difference in fitness levels. We monitor our fitness levels. You know, there's scientific measurements of all of these things now. So I would say that there's probably not that much difference in the time spent training, the physical conditioning. Quality of players is obviously one thing, and to have a big panel of quality players. Again, Dublin showed that on Saturday, and that was probably the difference between them and Monaghan. They had the 5th Cavalry to arrive in the last quarter of the match, and the team that finishes the game is generally the more important team rather than the one that finishes. But I would say that we are innocents abroad at the top level, and we have to start learning better and quicker and adapt to the better teams, because we'll be playing them in the league next year again.
A final one, just seeing as you mentioned Clifford, what are we seeing here in this guy? People are using the phrase, well, could well be the greatest of all time. You've seen your fair share.
Well, I've seen 50 years of football, certainly. First All-Ireland I was in 1967 when Meath won it, and I think I have been at most of them and fairly close observer of football from the 70s on anyway, when I started playing myself. I certainly wouldn't have seen any better than him, and he's the best forward I think I have seen in that whole era. So but I think we're in a golden era insofar as 5 or 6 of the Dublin players that we saw over the last 10 or 12 years are the best players I have seen that in that 50 years. I'd say like James McCarthy, maybe if you look at 12 years of football, he's probably the best footballer of that 12 years. Clifford is the best forward probably of the 50 years.
Mm. And do you have a strong sense of Kerry or Dublin?
No, I don't have a strong sense, but the Dublin seem to be on a mission, and if they're able to hold the same Clifford to 5 or 6 points, it's difficult to see Dublin doing anything but winning, because Kerry haven't impressed me that much now, and they have a huge reliance on one player, which is a dangerous thing going into an All-Ireland final. He hasn't let them down at club or county level for a long, long time, but like he can't keep dragging them over the line. Like, you know, there needs to be a few other willing horses to carry the load.
Yeah, well, look, it should be a really good game, if nothing else. Congratulations again. Thank you so much for the time. It's very much appreciated. We got no Latin in, but we did our best.
Small steps.
Well done. Congratulations, though, and we'll talk to you again soon. Colm O'Rourke, thank you very much.
Thanks, Joe.
Cheers.
Bye-bye. That
is the Meath manager, Colm O'Rourke, with us. And Gaelic Football and Off the Ball is in partnership with AIB, proud sponsors of the Senior Football Championship. You can check out #TheToughest for more.
Gaelic Football on Off the Ball
with AIB, proud sponsors of the GAA Senior Football Championship. Check out #TheToughest for more.